Ladies and gentlemen, fans of intelligent, rational debate everywhere, let's get ready to logic. In this corner, weighing in at 110 pounds, fighting out of Toronto, Canada, the master of postmodern destruction, Jordan Peterson.
Thank you for having me.
And fighting in the stained t-shirt and dirty pants, hailing all the way from Slovenia, Slavoj Žižek.
Thank you for my fellow neoliberal late capitalist subjects to observe these fantastic debates we will be having today.
Logical combatants. The opening question of this debate comes from our sponsor, WorldStarHipHop.com. Gentlemen, you have $7.50 and not a penny more to build the perfect hoe. Peterson, you won the coin toss backstage. You may respond.
Well, I think that this question points out so many of the problems of this postmodern age. I mean, you only have $2 to give the hoe an hourglass figure, but it's 50 cents if she's a stripper. Wouldn't the second thing be true if the first one would be true? But it's $1.50 more. It's insane. You know, I see these young men coming to me with tears in their eyes because they're romantic partners, these people who share this very special, delicate, insane thing called busting with them. And they go up to them and they say, she was telling people that she was sucking dick while I was playing 2K. And when people said if they thought it was my dick, she said faux. She hit the dab on them. I am so sick of women hitting the dab on young men. They say they have to do it to them. You never have to do it to somebody. So I reject your premise. I will build the perfect hoe with ever many dollars it takes or doesn't take.
Mr. Žižek, your response.
First, I would like to agree with my colleague, Mr. Peterson, in that I also reject the very premise of the question because the notion that there is a limited number of dollars that one must use to build the perfect hoe is, in fact, purist ideology. It is the capitalist system telling you that, no, you do not deserve the hourglass figure. You do not deserve the stripper woman with her own job who does not have kids. You must choose one small part of this. You must live with less. Well, those in the capitalist overclass are able to have unlimited big booty hoes at their disposal at all times. And I say that we must move towards a post-capitalist future in which the big booties and the head game are equally distributed to all.
Our next question comes from sponsor Dippers Nation. Gentlemen, if you will look to the screen behind you, on the left, you will see a picture of a woman with a gorgeous, large posterior. And on the right, a full can of Copenhagen Rough Cut dip. Gentlemen, what are you going for?
Well, you know, I don't think that the makers of this question intended it to be as such, but it's sort of showing the double-edged sword of modern life, you know. The promiscuousness of this postmodern age where you just go from big ass to big ass, busting on the small of the back, creating a little pool of your own bust in the small of your best, like an oasis in the desert of meaninglessness in these young men's lives. But then the other thing you can get is dip. Dip? That's the thing. It's either an ass or dip. That's the question we're posing to young men?
I disagree in that I think that both the dip and the large posterior both represent Lacanian desire subjects that represent one's ineffable desires that transcend the physical realm, and that the choice between the two is the choice between to become oneself or to try to become what one cannot become.
Final question. Fellas, you're both home staying at your brother's house for the weekend. You go downstairs in the middle of the night and see his 10 out of 10 smoke show wife bent over the refrigerator pulling out an item from the fridge. She's wearing very little. Fellas, what are you doing?
I am confused. I'm upset. I am wondering not only how did she get in here, but how did it get to this point in my life where it's okay for a woman to be naked in my brother's house, even if it's past midnight. You know, it used to be that a woman would wear a house dress and she wouldn't be showing her Fashion Nova thong that she saw on Instagram to buy, that there used to be some sort of dignity of principles. And yes, you know, everyone in this room would pull up behind her and say, what are you doing with all that? But that doesn't make it right.
I would, of course, politely ask her to step aside, and then I would go to town on the leftover ham from dinner.
What have you made of all this?
I don't get half the on the one hand, I don't get half the references and the jargon and the accents. On the other hand, I don't understand the other half either.
Oh, what a stupid fucking show. This is such a stupid show.
All right, time for it. Let's do the a cappella version. All I want to be is El Chapo.
Okay. We are back, and at the end there, you may have gotten a little preview of our guest for this week, which is my papa, father. I'm ever so glad that you're here.
Who is my papa? No, actually, which is okay, because you said guest. So, go ahead.
This is off to a good start.
I'm an editor.
My father, it's Daniel Menaker sitting in for us today. Dad, how you doing?
Fine. I can't believe that I'm in Brooklyn. It's the first time in many years, and it's still Brooklyn. It hasn't changed, except for you guys.
Kings of the city.
Yeah. There was a New York magazine about 10 years ago where it showed the Manhattan skyline, and underneath it said, Manhattan, the new Brooklyn. And I thought, yeah, things are changing, you know?
Well, you're sitting in this week because I promised long ago that we would get to the bottom of the secret Menaker family history.
You're not even going to get to the middle, but we'll try. Go ahead.
Well, much of it will be self-serving. There will be many glaring omissions, and a lot of it will be made up. But nonetheless, I've told you and Mom a while ago that a great deal of your family history, in terms of your father, my grandfather, has become fodder for a certain amount of speculation on sort of people who are diametrically opposed in every regard, except they both all hate me and the show. And a lot of this family...
Why do you suppose that is? Just pure envy? Is it like green?
Well, no, I wouldn't say they're just jealous. I think they probably have very good reasons for hating
Ideological.
the show. Okay?
No, it's all jealousy, 100%.
Did you hear that cold open? No one has a good reason to hate this show.
No.
But also, it's an interesting family history about the left and socialism in America as well. So, where should we begin here? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the first Menakers who came to this country? Who were they, and when did they get here?
Well, it's a complicated question, but because Menakers are all over the place, as it turns out. I hadn't known that until the last 10 years or so. My grandfather, Solomon Menaker, came here at the time that he arrived, for sure. And I don't know a whole lot about it. And my grandmother also. And they got together. She was from Odessa, and he was from Vilna. And they were both the children of Orthodox Jews. And they both joined the European, Russian, Polish ferment against Orthodox Judaism and became radicalized. They knew they couldn't stay where they were because of pogroms, and so they came here. And I believe they met here. My grandfather started out forming an ideal community somewhere in the Midwest, which, like all ideal communities in the Midwest, bottomed out pretty quickly. And so he came back, of course, to New Jersey, and started somehow a handkerchief plant.
Well, that was a very common path for people around that time.
What, the handkerchief trade?
Well, that old walnut, but like to go to an idealistic utopian town in the Midwest where it all goes awry because the guy that planned it like went insane and thought he was Jesus Christ.
No, well, my grandfather didn't think that. He thought he was essentially born to be a handkerchief manufacturer. So it's a little bit different. So do you know that? Is that what Will Menaker used to call a true fact?
A true fact stated?
No, I mean... was what you just said, which sounded so authoritative, about people going to the Midwest, forming communities? Yes?
Oh, no, I just know that's littered throughout the Midwest. Is like, oh, people tried a town here where there was no money, but then the guy like drank pond water and was like, oh, I'm Jesus Christ, and they stopped doing it. It's sort of the story of how Germans stopped being sort of communitarian in America.
Well, my grandfather didn't stop. He came back. He started in northern New Jersey, a textile plant. He shared all the profits with his workers in a very communal way. He had he gave cultural presentations to the people who toiled in his factory. He's a very idealistic man. He always ate lunch with the people who worked in his factories, word has it. But he had a partner who decided he wanted to make money. And that was the end of that experiment. So my grandmother and my grandfather moved to Columbia County and decided to start an ideal farm community and tried to sort of radicalize the local farmers who had no idea who he was or what he was talking about. And to quote my son, my fail son, he was a fail granddad in that regard. And so there was a diaspora of Menakers. There were 7 boys, and they sort of spread out from that Columbia County farmland to populate the Berkshires. What did you ask me, Will?
Who are the first Menakers who came to America? But let's go to the sons.
Okay, the sons.
Of which your father was one of them. Can we talk about
the youngest?
Yeah, he was the youngest. Let's talk about all the brothers.
Okay, so there were 7 boys, and I was taught by my uncle Frederick Engels Menaker to say their names this way: Georgie, Willie, Petey, Nicky, Angie, Lenny, Bobby. Those were the 7 boys. George Menaker, who turned out to be an accountant of all things, had no middle name. William Menaker was named after William. His middle name was Morris, named after the utopian William Morris, furniture maker, radical, economic idealist. Peter was named after a Soviet poet, a pre-Soviet poet named Peter Lavrov Menaker, and I think the Venona papers have that middle name wrong. Uncle Nick was named.
Yeah, in the Venona book here, it says he's named after Peter Kropotkin. How do you say that?
Kropotkin.
Yeah, but that's wrong.
I think that's wrong. Nick was named after Nicholas Chernyshevsky, a radical, I think, pre-Soviet.
Yeah, he wrote What Is to Be Done.
What is to be done? The answer was, in my family, not much. Enough, I should say. And Frederick Engels Menaker needs no explanation. Leonard Aveling Menaker was named after supposedly Marx's daughter Leonora, who married a Mr. Aveling, or so word has it. I haven't looked into it, not even in preparation for this, because I know that actual definite factual accuracy is not always necessary here. And my father, Robert Owen Menaker, who is named after Robert Owen, I think one of those Midwestern utopians.
Okay, so you have a large family, all named after famous socialists and communists, very idealistic, very left wing family. How did your father, my grandfather, how did he get mixed up in this whole spying on America business?
Well, as I understand it, which is not very far, the Communist Party of the United States of America was actively recruiting in the 30s during the Depression and maybe 20s before that, members who were young, idealistic, anti-capitalist, true believers. And my father was one of them. And he was a member of the party. And apparently as should be no surprise to anyone, the KGB was overseeing this supposedly purely political and ideological movement and was recruiting operatives for spying in America and elsewhere. And it seems as though my father was one of their recruits.
This was just after World War II, like mid 40s around.
Yeah, maybe even before that.
Well, actually, okay. Let me read from this book now, which is a book called Venona: Decoding Soviet Espionage in America. Now, if you look up Robert Owen Menaker on Wikipedia, one of the first articles you will get is Americans named in the Venona papers. The Venona Project was an American signal intelligence program run that had decrypted the KGB's communications with their various assets in America and elsewhere. So I just want to read from this book now, Venona, Decoding Soviet Espionage in America. It says here, when he returned from Mexico, Floyd Miller, do you know who Floyd Miller is?
Oh, yeah, my parents' best friend.
Okay. Floyd Miller expressed concern to the KGB that his true alliance might be exposed to the Trotskyists. Another KGB agent pretending sympathy for the Trotskyist Fourth International, a friend of Miller's named Robert Owen Menaker, had returned to New York from Latin America. Menaker, Miller learned, had told some of his relatives that he was not a Trotskyist, but associated with them on a communist assignment. Miller, the KGB reported, is afraid that this may get to the ears of the polecats, and they may become suspicious of Miller as he came to them through Bob Menaker, your father. And then it goes on here to describe Robert Owen Menaker came from a radical family. His father, in prison for revolutionary activities in Russia, prospered in America as co-owner of a handkerchief factory. Then it goes on to name all of the brothers and their names. And it says, one of Robert's brothers, Frederick Engels, Ainge Menaker, was an openly communist journalist and ran a League of American Writers' Home for anti-Nazi refugees in France. When the house was closed, he arranged shelter for some of the exiles in the home of the Airline family in Mexico City, where he cooked for them. Years later, Ainge's nephew and Robert's son, Daniel Menaker, wrote an affectionate portrait of his communist uncle.
See, now that's the thing that, of course, being a narcissistic writer, I fastened on. I don't care any of the rest of that shit. But this affectionate portrait of what? What does it say?
It says an affectionate portrait of his communist uncle. He's referring to, of course,
the Old Left.
Your first book, The Old Left.
Wasn't my first book. You notice how well my son knows my work. There were 4 books before that. Will read them. They actually suck.
Well,
but
you actually have a book. The Worst was one of them, right?
Yeah, yeah, but that's much later. I have a very long and very undistinguished literary history, and I want you to get it straight, okay? Okay. So The Old Left was a book of short stories that was indeed based on the story of my uncle, Frederick Engels Menaker. It was not an affectionate... See, this bugs me. It was not an affectionate portrait of my uncle. First of all, he wasn't presented as being very well. In fact, when he read the stories, all the stuff that made him out to be kind, sweet, and generous, which was essentially made up, he said, "You got that right." And all the stuff about him being a cranky, sarcastic, unsatisfiable old codger, he said, "I understand. It's fiction. You have to make stuff up." So anyway, it's hardly what he says. Those guys called me, by the way.
The guys who wrote this book?
Harvey Clare and whoever.
James Earl Haynes and Harvey Keir.
Clare?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were really looking for me to be some kind of, spy or operative myself. But as you can tell, and your listeners can tell all too well, I don't really know a lot, and it's made it my business until you had to butt in and ask me these questions, and I had to refresh what's left of my memory about my family.
Well, going on in the book here, it says, in his account of his family, Daniel Menaker noted that the Communist Party had sent his father to Mexico to keep an eye on Trotsky in exile. He certainly did that, but more as well, although exactly what Menaker's assignment was is not clear from the 16 Venona messages.
See, now that's
in which
important.
He was mentioned.
That's important. It wasn't clear because I think he didn't know himself. In fact, the only thing he ever told me about was with regard to Trotsky's exile in Mexico, was that he really liked to drink with Trotsky's bodyguards. And that was about the extent of his...
So he didn't go and he didn't buy ice picks at any point.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is very interesting here. I think maybe he
Is the driver,
think he whacked Trotsky?
No, I know he didn't, because I think he was taken entirely by surprise to it. I think, you know, a lot of the Russian influence on the Communist Party of the United States was on people who were not very politically well educated and who were idealistic. And that whole side of the family, my Uncle Ange, my father, and so on, they were basically romantics. I mean, they had economic convictions, I suppose. They really believed that capitalism was exploitative and ultimately doomed. But the work that they did, I actually don't think, maybe it's just self-defense, I don't think they knew they were being run by the KGB. I'm not sure, but certainly my father never talked about that. And he seemed pretty feckless altogether. In fact, when it came time for the House Un-American Activities Committee to begin to investigate some of these people, and they were brought up, you know, to Congress to be interrogated, my father was protected from that, partly because he probably didn't know much, but also because our family had befriended an FBI agent named Tom McDade, who was a counselor at my other uncle's boys' camp. And I think Tom McDade protected my father from being questioned out of the conviction, not so much of friendship, but because he thought my father was not aware exactly of what he was doing, which was true of so many people who joined the party in the 40s and 50s in America.
Well,
I'm not excusing them. I don't know.
No. On this show, we're celebrating them.
Oh, okay.
But going on in the Venona book here, speaking of your father, it says Menaker had difficulties as an agent.
Need we say more?
In 1944, he returned from a trip to Chile and tried to find permanent employment in the United States. Michael Bird complained to the New York KGB office that Menaker had alienated several companies with whom he did business. The New York KGB station chief cabled Moscow that in working with Menaker, allowances should be made since he had not been thoroughly trained or screened prior to be given his assignment. Later messages...
You see, if you'd read that first, I wouldn't have had to gab on so much about it, but now you're just proving my point.
Later messages are only slightly clearer about Menaker's tasks. In one message, the KGB speculated about the possibility that Lawrence Duggan, one of its sources who had recently resigned from the State Department, might attain a job in Chile to do some unspecified work with or in place of Menaker. It then goes on to say here, like his friend Floyd Miller, Robert Menaker apparently cooperated to some extent with the FBI in the 1950s. His name never surfaced in connection with the investigations of Soviet espionage. He was never indicted or questioned by congressional committees. His son wrote of his frequent presence in his household in the 1950s of a friendly FBI agent, but his father never spoke about precisely what he did in Mexico or what he told the FBI.
Well, that's because he may not have known what he was doing.
Well, this is all very, you know, you're protecting your father here,
your grandfather.
You know,
yes.
It's unclear what he knew
you know,
or did.
I mean, it's true, and he may have been the most nefarious, diabolical Soviet agent who ever lived, for all I know. It doesn't seem like that in the Venona papers, but it's also the case that I don't think that. Well, anyway, no. Never mind. I'll stop being an apologist. I don't know what he did, but I know who he was, and it seems to me that again, it was part of this very widespread, especially in New York, romantic association with the ideas of socialism that got these people into the situations that they were in. I mean, my mother helped to found the newspaper guild at Fortune, for instance. So they were union people, and the fact. What really amazed me about what you just read and what I read just before I came here in order to try to find something out about my family is that there was the KGB involvement. I'm not sure I even knew that. That's a little scary.
Well, what about the FBI involvement? Because this gets in now to the hinge of one of the conspiracy theories about the show and the family. So talk about Tom McDade. I remember Tom McDade. He was one of the FBI agents that was on the Dillinger case, right?
Yeah, he had a bullet wound in his hand from babyface Nelson. I mean,
wow.
How cool is that? He chased Dillinger. He chased Capone. He was a big sort of, American criminal FBI agent, a big, tall guy. He showed me how to shoot a .45. And in fact, he sort of held it himself and he shot at a target. And then he said, that's how you do it. He said, watch for the kick. And he gave it to me. And my hand went straight down. It's so heavy. Have you held a .45?
Unfortunately not.
No.
Oh,
Well,
man. Beautiful.
Felix?
Absolutely beautiful.
Okay.
I could shoot it with one hand, not really bragging, just an honest
Anyway.
appraisal of my abilities.
Anyway,
I don't know why no one ever contacted me to be an agent.
Right.
I'm not taking it
you're a little
personally.
young for the for the American Communist Party, I have to say.
I was born in 90, I had a little bit before.
Not
the wall.
1890, no. Tom was a very good family friend. I think he protected my family out of a genuine conviction, as I said before, that they were not particularly involved in the nastiest part of Russian communist operations in this country.
Okay, well, this is like I said, this is the first hinge of one side of this conspiracy theory. The thing you just shared,
Wait. What's the one hand?
the
the
FBI's connection to our family and Tom McDade in particular, and in particular, the anecdote you just told about Tom McDade teaching you how to shoot a gun has been someone found that section in the old left and shared it on Twitter as an example of, I think the quote was,
collusion.
The cops literally taught him how to shoot a gun, ha ha ha, about you, implying that our whole family is cops and snitches, basically.
Well.
So this from your telling of it, that the sympathetic FBI agent who shielded our family from the House Un-American Activities Committee. It seems convenient. I mean, it does sort of from an outside look does seem like maybe he collaborated or snitched a little bit.
I have no idea. I mean, he may have.
May I remind you that you're under oath in
My
this podcast,
rationalization, my rationalization would be that if he talked to Tom McDade about his activities, that the reason, he had not much to reveal. So let's say he cooperated, but what did he give them? I doubt very much of value. If my father or Floyd Miller or anybody cooperated with HUAC without being interrogated, it's something I don't know about. The myth or the truth I was given is that, at least in my father's case, there was not a whole lot of there.
Mm-hmm. Now, these details have been assembled by a certain clique of people on this sort of extremely online left. I guess, for lack of a better word, we'll call them the tanky left. The sort of people who
Stalin did nothing wrong.
Yeah, people who view themselves as communists. Right. That this is part and parcel. That basically this show and my own career is part of essentially a 3 generations long plot by the FBI and others to sort of
ruin the left
in America. Yeah,
right.
And that you're a part of it. I'm a part of it. Keep in mind, your father, Robert Menaker,
Robert Owen,
died when I was 3 years old.
Right.
I have 1 or 2 memories of him,
but not before he passed on this awful gene to you, apparently.
Right. And the idea that your career at the New Yorker and in publishing,
it's all part of
it. And then subsequently the New Yorker's coverage of our podcast
all
early on in the show is, like these
a web.
These all
it's a
line
web.
Up. Yeah, all these coincidences and arrangements.
Now, what's the other side?
Okay, the other side is that we're not dupes of the FBI.
These are for people who are to our right, who are conventional Democrats who feel like we're undermining the opposition to Trump and, in fact, are on his side because your father was a communist agent and your whole family since then has been part of a Russian operation, an intelligence operation.
So the 2 opposing sides of this conspiracy theory is that one believes that we're an entire family of snitches for the feds, and the other thinks that we're an entire family of snitches for the KGB and Russia to this day.
Yeah.
The FSB, I suppose, now.
Well, I
normal stuff.
I like the attention. Writers are always looking for attention, and I like the attention. And I mean, knowing how disorganized and chaotic you guys are and totally out of your minds, and I'm proud as I am of you, I think that, and knowing the people in my family that preceded us, it seems to me pretty far-fetched to think of any possible actual organization behind our efforts.
Well, that's
You would say that, though, wouldn't you?
that's the thing.
I would, because it's exactly wrong. I mean, yeah.
That's the thing. You're the organized ones. We're the agents of chaos.
I know. So why won't they say that since you guys are complete anarchists in ideologically and in your humor and everything, why won't they bring that back to me instead of taking what's behind us and putting it into you guys? Why not say, oh, Will Menaker and the other members of that, miscreant crew are taking after the chaotic kind of like non-political aspects of their forebears. I don't know about your family. Who are these people anyway?
Where am I?
Where am I? What's going on?
My great-grandfather was one of the first Jews to play piano in the Russian Imperial Army. Me personally, my only political mission is to bring back musical instruments as a rank in the army.
Wait a minute, didn't one of your relatives work for Capone?
Yes. My great-great-uncle worked for Capone. And
You see-
stole from him and then topped himself because he got scared. And it's like, that's why I will never have anxiety, because he embarrassed the family. I'll never do that. When I steal from you guys, I won't kill myself.
My dad worked at a bowling alley.
Right. And before that?
He was a salesman.
And your grandparents,
I don't know. The supermarket manager. My grandfather was, and then my other grandfather ran a plating company.
So the 4 or 5 of us sitting here, the truth is that we all emerge in a way from American chaos. I mean, these forebears are all over the place. I mean, you're doing a pretty far left, humorous, satirical podcast, but to try to ascribe it to any direct influence of some controlling force is good. It's good. It's good for you guys, but it's also to be almost more of a laughing stock than the show is. I mean, it's absurd. And but it's an effort to draw and find patterns out of what is essentially the American history of chaos within families.
But the detractors, they're also they're the epitome of American chaos, because they can only view politics, the execution of politics, as media that people do or don't consume. So the highest level of political action you do is to put out a media product. And even if I think about 100,000 people listen to us, which is way more than we ever thought we would have, but in the grand scheme of things,
I'll take care of that. It'll go down after this one.
In the grand scheme of things, it's not that many, and it's really not enough to affect the course of the country. Especially the guys we were making fun of at the beginning of the show, like Jordan Peterson, have 100, 200 times that level of adherence, and it's going back to the Curtis thing of giving up the idea of power and just focusing on entertainment.
See, and that's the big shift, because when I was a kid, romantic as it may have been, there was a feeling on the left in America, however misguided, however tainted by foreign influence, that in fact Henry Wallace could be president, that we could have a more just and social society, I think that part of my parents' hope and dream was probably sincere and truly felt, that this could be an economically more just nation. And I suppose the Roosevelt administration, because of the Depression, saw to some of that, but we've had a obviously very serious regression. And all those bets seem to be off. And I completely agree with what you guys are doing in a way, which is to expose the emptiness of media convictions as opposed to real world action and activity. I mean,
Of which we do none.
of which you do none, and therefore I take it back.
Actually, I remember one of the stories you told me about growing up in the Greenwich Village as it relates to Henry Wallace, is you said the Italian kids would chase you and throw fluorescent light bulbs at you because
We would be going to the Little Red Schoolhouse, which was filled with Little Reds, and yeah, the kids in the Catholic school on the corner, we would be chanting for Henry Wallace, something like Dewey is somewhere doing something. Truman is somewhere else, and Wallace is in the White House talking to a lady. That was the end of it. In other words, it was
talking to a lady.
yeah, talking to a lady.
That was third base back then.
right, right. First base.
And then they would.
One of my
big fluorescent light bulbs.
and then we would be marching the playground, and the kids from St. Anne's, I think that was what it was on the corner of Bleecker Street, would, they hated us. They thought we were commies, and they would throw, and they were told that fluorescent light bulbs have poison in them, and so they threw them. Is that true?
I don't think
You don't
want to
want to
inhale.
you don't want to inhale.
I
them.
think all Italians just think any light bulbs are magic and have newts and worms in them. It's not supposed to work like that. The candle don't come with a switch.
the lads that went out because you disrespected your mother.
Every time I move out of my mother's house, the glass candles don't work. They're cursed.
So that was your experience with activism at a young age.
Yeah, and I had a feeling as I went to high school and college and so on. I began to see this historical movement as both farcical and admirable, as sort of futile on the one hand, and yet motivated by what I take to be from my parents genuine conviction about economics. But I think they simply weren't dealing with. The Depression offered a somewhat fertile field for socialistic ideas in this country. When the Second World War happened, when the economy began to recover, that began to evaporate, and it continues to evaporate now with the evaporation of unions, which are just disappearing almost every day. So that, it's kind of Hegelian, if you'll pardon the expression. I mean, this sort of in and out of this. Right now, there's no room for you guys. So I just want you to know that. I mean, your ideas are on the fringes, but you've obviously struck someone's nerve, and that's a good thing.
So on the fringes, I think we're nibbling at the outside.
You just told me just a few minutes ago that you only had X number of subscribers versus these media people who are selling their supposed ideas to millions of people at the same time. So, I don't know. Just make enough money to pay for my home when I'm older. That's all I want.
Just a few other things about family history. Could you talk a little bit about, we talked briefly about my great-uncle Ainge, sort of a crabby figure who you knew very well. Could you talk about him in World War I and then him later in the Spanish Civil War?
He was gassed in the First World War, fighting for this country, as they say. He lost all his hair on that account. He was the only bald person in our family, practically. I did inherit some decent hair. He then went to southern France. He did not fight in the Spanish Civil War, but according to legend, he drove an ambulance into northern Spain to pick up wounded Lincoln Brigade soldiers and bring them to medical care in southern France. I was brought up on two record albums called Songs from the Spanish Civil War, which I listen to this day. Freiheit, Jarama Valley, Pete Seeger sang them. The Almanac Singers, which was Pete Seeger's first group, sang them. And folk music and folk dancing and square dancing were also part of our heritage and continue to, affect me to this day.
We should use Freiheit as the outro music.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and get the right one. Get
Send
the
me
German one.
The German one?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great.
And then finally, I just want to, get you on the record here. Does the New Yorker magazine continue to pay you money in any way?
I don't know whether to reveal this or not. No. Why? Why do you ask?
Just curious. Just wanted to get that on the record. And
Random House does.
okay.
I'm on pension, blah, blah. So,
Chris, put in that my money real good.
Man, money really good over here, nigga. I don't give a fuck.
And last but not least, and then just again, once again for the record, did you tell Gia Tolentino to write that profile of us using your extensive connections in the New Yorker?
I did not tell her. I just sent her a check of a certain amount, which was not unusual because I'm trying to seed my offspring's bank account with money that I can then collect when it's time to go to the home. So it was all a conspiracy.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Okay.
Daniel Menaker, my dad, everybody. Would you like to, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, Chapo Trap House. It's a great show, folks. Subscribe if this is one of those giveaway, capitalistic, you have to pay $5 for it episodes. Well, thank you for that. But if you haven't subscribed, my medical care depends upon it. That's all you need to know.
Excellent. Subscribe or my dad will die. Okay, and we are back. And to move things along, I will pass the ball to Felix.
I can has internets. Ooh, methinks there is some fail in the air on the internets. Did somebody say bacon plus beer equals weekends? There's Ziesel on all the end of these. If you do not recognize these speech patterns, it's because you, like most of our listeners, were born in 2012. You're all little babies. This was the parlance of the conservative blogosphere and the internet at large from about, I'd say, the year 1999 to about a year ago. It's the normie internet. We have often found it charming. We've found that some erroneous studies with smaller sample sizes have said that more normies are more likely to be honest, fulfilled people, good people. We've even said that. But then something happened. In the wake of the Parkland shooting, NRA spokeswoman, gun babe Dana Loesch, has once again reemerged onto the national stage, making horrifically fascist videos for the NRA where she talks about needing to protect ourselves from enemies, rootless cosmopolitans, all this, and, just going on racialized terror sprees, being awful. But there are more wrinkles to Dana Loesch on her wrinkleless, beautiful face. I'm talking about Dana Loesch's harsh normie tweets.
Felix has done some this is an Chapo, investigative report.
All right, let me start out. These start in 2008, which, if you guys remember, 2008 was a big year for sort of the twilight of Flash animation. It was, if you wanted to make a video of a dog with George Bush's head on it, it was still pretty funny.
The age of Jib Jab.
Imgur was getting off the ground. People using gifs of Ron Swanson to give each other life advice. All right, we begin. Vox Day, I pwned you. Now get over it. You can't step to this. Now go play World of Warcraft and cry.
That's not good.
This is from 2013. Vampires are a fad, but zombies are forever. Winky face.
Ooh.
Awesome. Thanks. Anything with zombies is pure metal. I will definitely incorporate it on air. That's from 2009. I would like to listen to how she incorporated zombies on air. Probably pretty funny. From 2011. This was in December. She was feeling very festive. Simply, the Black Keys FTW. I have 3 more pages of this. 2015. My oldest says I'm the female version of Tallahassee from Zombieland. Maybe, but without the Twinkie obsession. Fudge rounds FTW.
Fudge rounds?
It's a cookie.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant fudge bullets.
Yeah, fudge bullets.
That's what you'd have to kill Eric Erickson with. From 2014, which is, you guys remember, big year for a Tea Party, and probably off the strength of this tweet alone. Walking Dead tomorrow, FTW.
We're actually sitting here right now with, I think, one of 10 Americans who still watches The Walking Dead. You love that show, don't you, Dad?
I want to be Negan.
All I want to be is Negan.
Well, that's right. That should be your theme song.
Why do you like Negan so much, Dad?
I mean, it's it's a sort of yin and yang. I love him because he is really truly a marvelously evil character. He's a terrible, terrible man, and the best thing he did was on when he was extinguishing some of what's his name's little cadre. He has this bat that he wraps with barbed wire, and it seems to me actually a media atrocity that people are, including me, are so drawn to this. I mean, he's really an effectively terrible, evil person.
It's like, why not just have a bat? Why the barbed wire?
Oh, but that's like saying, why not have,
No, I'm saying like this guy's really evil.
Why not just have zombies? What about zombies and bacon? That's what
There
Dana
you go.
should say.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant to say, and I totally agree. No, Negan. What can I say? He also has a name like Reagan. I mean, it's sort of there's an association. But then there's Jennifer Egan, who's such a wonderful writer. There's something. There's something evocative about Negan, and I don't even know if he has a first name. Is it Jim? What is his first name?
I think that would break the spell if you knew he had a normal human's first name.
So he's what we call. There are many prenominals, like models who have only first names. Imam, Bono, etc., who just use their first names. Negan just uses his last name, and I assume, unless his name is Negan, in which case he wins both ways. I don't know.
He's Sirhan's son.
Right.
You will be starting your own Walking Dead cast shortly after your celebrated appearance.
Well,
on our
I have
show.
to tell you, after being on this show now, I have to say that doing a podcast is hard, and my hat is off to you. I'm afraid that I'm not up to it. I'm over the hill.
It's what I always say. You got doctors, surgeons, especially first responders on one side, then you got us on the other. Those guys can take days off. We can't.
I love that you said, like I always say.
I'm always saying it.
Yeah.
I'm screaming it in the middle of the night when I wake
there
up.
was a guy I worked with who collected things like that. One of them was he gets into a cab, and the cab driver says, like I said, I hadn't said anything. Or it's like everything else about anything.
It's
right?
true. Everything is connected, though. That guy's
That's right.
a genius. You mentioned models, in the New York cosmopolitan scene, it's okay to be sexualized. Normies despise sex unless it's like nerd sex. Their wife dresses up like Game of Thrones and they have like some Twizzler underwear or some stupid bullshit. Just a prelude for them to spasm and missionary for 3 minutes and create more kids named Taylor. But Dana Loesch is in that normie anti-sexual tradition because she says in August of 2012, had to block the mail, spending his workday tweeting ass into my timeline. Who hasn't been there? But now I have the, I think...
Yeah, hit us with this.
This is sort of like the Mein Kampf of this. This is the darkest thing I've ever read in my life.
There's no poetry after this tweet.
This is verbal Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And it's, of course, from April 2008, which everyone kind of talked like this, and that's no excuse, but they did. I has wine, buzz blogging commenceth.
Whew.
Takes a lot out of you, huh?
That is blood curdling.
A lot of Z's in that.
That is one of the worst things I've ever read. Legitimately.
Can I sort of piggybacking off of Dana Loesch's tweets? One of my favorite things now is Bill O'Reilly's tip of the day on Twitter. They're really good, and I just came across a really good one here I want to share.
Hit my bitch with that tip of the day. Did you know that retailers are skimping on fabric now? Don't feel like you're a size up.
Here's Bill O'Reilly's tip of the day from November 30th, 2017. Here's the tip of the day. Fresh breath will make life easier. The best mouthwash in the marketplace is at Smart Mouth. I have no association. With the company. Just looking out for you.
Smart Mouth, Wi-Fi enabled mouthwash. Smart Mouth.
He probably thinks that's the funniest shit in the world. He's like, I watched Eddie Murphy Raw. Nothing. But that mouthwash is a double entendre. Everyone can enjoy that. Tip of the day: puns. Everyone can enjoy them. All ages.
Yeah. Another normie trait. They love puns.
Yeah. Our theory with the normie tweets, though, is that, you know, people have always pointed out that the base of a fascist or authoritarian movement is the petite bourgeois. But beyond that, it's the normies.
Yes.
Who were...
There's a Venn diagram that has a lot of overlap, but it's not a perfect circle. But in the middle is your Nazis, is your fascists.
Yeah. Who were the normies of Germany? They were the Bavarians. Who were the first people that the Nazis went after? People who couldn't enjoy epic bacon.
Yeah. The beer.
They started in the beer hall.
Yes.
Yeah. Enjoying epic beer.
Yeah, it's like they marched towards the Munich City Hall saying, beer cheaper than, what is it? Cheaper than sex?
Oh, yeah. Beer cheaper than sex, and it doesn't bother you after.
Yeah.
Also,
attacks on degenerate art, also sort of like hipster bashing.
yes,
you know?
yes. It's like those side by sides where it's like Nicki Minaj took 10 writers to write a song called "Stupid Ho" and the Beatles, blah blah blah. Also, Lebensborn, German for epic golden man babies. Hermann Goering was kind of the big peeler of the Nazi movement, and he would frequently regale people with stories of his exploits, and they would go, big grouper, I wish I had your life.
It is true, though, that fascism is essentially the attempt to create a universal totalitarian normiehood, where there is nothing outside of the normie, where there's no smart ass to make fun of you for loving epic bacon and doing memes about it, where those people are rounded up and sent away and massacred, where there's just a place for people to be a little twisted and a little weird, but within this very regimented confines. And Dana Loesch is certainly a modern day exponent of that.
In conclusion, Dana, you're a queen. I would love to have epic internets with you. Come on the show sometimes. We'll do Bacon Win. We'll play, one of those card games. We'll have a great time. Icon has friendships on the internets.
Icon has Lebensraum.
Yeah.
Icon has Czechoslovakia.
Hitler. After Jesse Owens won at Munich, Hitler was like, awkward.
I mean, when you think about it, like Hitler was an artist after World War I, right? When the experience of World War I created this new cutting edge of art, right? Like Otto Dix and those people, like challenging assumptions about representation and stuff, trying to put the horrors of World War I onto the canvas. And what did Hitler want to make? Oh, I want to draw a nice little cottage. And they're like, no, dude, you're not getting into the fucking art school with that shit. Get the fuck out of here. And it's like, what? No, it's a nice little house. There's a little curl of smoke coming out of the window. And then they're like, oh, yeah, well, get this. All you fuckers, we're going to burn all this shit. We're going to send you all the camps. And everyone's going to love my shitty hotel art.
And that Hitler's fantasy is the fantasy of every poster guy who's like, and then the entire theater applauded.
Yes.
Then I killed all the degenerates.
Yep.
And his art, if you go to Imgur or something, like the art that gets upvoted is like, I drew Iron Man. It's just very literal. This is what my house looks like when it snows. I drew it.
Yeah, like one of the great artistic normie cries is, my kid could do that about any kind of abstract or modern art. Which you can imagine every Nazi saying that before they threw another painting on the bottom.
The highest end of art to people is like a photorealistic illustration of the cast of 2.5 Men. They're like, now that's art.
It's a picture of
just like Ashton Kutcher.
It's a picture of guns. It's a picture of a gun made of little guns.
That's a little too out there, but they'll accept it.
Do you want to read the Dennis Prager article?
Yeah.
So reading series for this week?
Let's do it.
This comes to us courtesy of old friend Dennis Prager, who, as I think we've mentioned before, I think still holds the title for most repellent thing we've ever read on this show.
Yeah. Married women need to close their eyes and think of Prager. It was pretty noxious.
There was a 2-part article that he wrote on wives not putting out.
Yes.
It was one of the most revolting things I've ever come across. This one's a little bit more upbeat. It's titled, Liberals and Conservatives Are Unhappy for Different Reasons, by Dennis Prager. This is in the National Review. The subhead is, Unhappy Americans on the right blame themselves, while unhappy Americans...
Yeah, what? What?
They're always taking accountability. They're not blaming anyone else. They're not mad at Enterprise Rent-A-Car for not working with the NRA because their biggest hobby is renting cars just to see how a Chrysler drives, even though it's too urban, and then cruising around blasting the Eagles and going into the most rural part of the tri-state area and crying, screaming, and then screaming the N-word into the glove box. They're never aggrieved. They're always normal.
They never direct all of their rage and frustration in life onto a Starbucks barista by making them put Herman Goering on a fucking cup.
Do you know what?
Sir, take a number. My number is Trump MAGA Christmas.
This is actually sort of a digression, but it's connected to what we were just talking about. The other thing that a lot of people discovered this week was like from Dana Loesch to Charlie Kirk to Dave Rubin and Todd Starnes, all of these right-wing media figures have this thing where they at airlines incessantly and are like never flying American again. And they put up these like weird, they say like, because they're putting up this whole thing now, they're like, I would never boycott a company or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they found dozens and dozens of tweets from these people where they're like, United Airlines, never flying with you again. That was the worst flight ever. And then a month later, it's like, American Airlines, do better, like United. Is it like, are they just trying to hustle these airlines because they have a media platform and they think they'll get miles or something?
I honestly think for people in media who do a lot of traveling, and it's sort of understandable, plane travel is deeply dispiriting and soul-crushing. I think after time, if you do it enough, it sort of shapes your life, and all you really care about anymore is having a good flight experience. And so that becomes your world, is that little cabin, and the need to sort of badger people on line to make it more exciting.
Again, these
more acceptable
half-hearted
for you.
boycott attempts that are gone back on, like with the next flight 1-to-1, I think is telling and funny because it presupposes that people actually exercise any kind of choice when they book a flight in this country. Does anyone choose an airline, or they just choose what's...
Well, I think conservatives do, because they're the type of freaks who are like, I just want to see how Delta flies. I'm just going to take a day trip to Phoenix just to see what their snacks are like.
But they are sort of forced to do it by their ideology, because deregulated airlines are supposed to be a one of those great free markets, one of those competitive enterprises where you choose among options, and that's what makes things good. You don't need the government making sure that there's a minimum standard, because the dollar is going to do that, the market's going to do that. But the reality is that because they've got the hub system, and because they basically split up areas between themselves, there is essentially no real competition. You pick the cheapest flight, which is usually the people who have whatever relationship in that specific area, and so you are pretty much locked in to a certain provider, and they can treat you and do treat you like absolute shit, and they can't accept that reality, so they want to fantasize that it's just they could move the needle with one airline over another.
So thank you, Jimmy Carter, for that, by the way.
Yeah, another
thing
great
we can thank
piece
Carter for.
Of our communist president, Jimmy Carter.
So already we set up the dichotomy in which if you're unhappy on the right, chances are you take a good hard look in the mirror and say, I'm the problem here.
And then
doing that.
They're all
never.
Yeah, you take a look in the mirror, you take a deep breath, and then you film yourself skeet shooting Keurig machines.
Yeah. All right, I've done some self-evaluation. Here's me and all my humongous cow-like sons calling in death threats to LL Bean because there was an interracial couple in a scarf ad.
Unhappy Americans on the left blame America.
Yes,
okay, so this is Dennis's thesis. So he writes here, one of the most important differences between the left and the right, one that greatly helps explain their differences, is the difference between...
Wait a minute, it's a difference that explains their differences?
Yeah, the important difference, one that greatly helps to explain the difference, is the difference between unhappy liberals and unhappy conservatives.
Say difference again.
This is scintillating. Once again, the prose sings.
Yeah. Unhappy conservatives generally believe they are unhappy because life is inherently difficult and tragic, and because they have made some unwise decisions in life.
Yeah, I'm just a big oaf who cruises around from one sitting position in air conditioning to another. But when the time comes, I'll take responsibility for why I have a slight bed sore on one part of my 3 square mile ass cheek. It's always what I do.
Unhappy liberals generally believe they are unhappy because they have been persecuted. Ask unhappy leftists why they are unhappy, and they are likely to respond that they are oppressed. This is the primary response given by unhappy leftist women, blacks, Latinos, and gays. For example, the more left-wing the woman, the more she will attribute her unhappiness to American society's patriarchy, sexism, and misogyny. She therefore considers herself oppressed, and believing one is oppressed makes happiness all but impossible. Likewise, the more left-wing the black, the more he or she will attribute his or her unhappiness to racism. And how is a black person living in a racist white country supposed to be happy? If you have ever spent time with black conservatives, one of the first things you will notice is they have a much happier disposition than left-wing blacks. I receive many calls to my radio show from black listeners. I almost always know immediately. I like that Dennis. I love that Dennis Prager is getting Howard Stern's old calls. He's like, sometimes I get a call from a gentleman called Angry Black, and I know that he is angry from his name. Then I get a call from King of All Blacks, who I know is much happier because he respects monarchy.
I have many black listeners. Michael Thomas is one. The other is Tyrone. What was his last name? Smithers.
So he goes, I always know immediately when they're on the right or left, solely by their tone of voice.
Yeah, because they're talking to Dennis fucking Prager.
The cheerful black caller is almost always a conservative.
Wow. He's got a song on his lips.
Oh, my God.
The left cultivates unhappiness by cultivating anger. It does this for the same reason wine growers cultivate grapes. No grapes, no wine. No anger, no left, and no Democratic Party.
What an amazing metaphor.
And angry people are not happy people. Well, okay, so Dennis brings up the example of conservative blacks being happier, right? And then the black people that call in my show are to praise me are much happier than the ones that call in to go, Dennis, what the fuck are you talking about? And I think, again, like unspoken here is the sort of class bias going on.
Yeah.
I mean, to be a conservative black, to use Dennis Prager's own language here, I think the entrance to that club is like $250,000 a year at least. So yeah,
or to be a fan of Prager's at all.
Yeah,
like everyone who's a fan of Dennis Prager has like a fucking Ski-Doo dealership and 16 fucking mortgages, but never blames the feminism for why his wife won't honk him off. Never.
So, like, the idea here is that, like, you know, conservative liberals just have their grievances. They're spiteful and they're angry and they're sort of envious because they haven't looked into their own heart to correct themselves.
Yeah, unlike the people who gathered with assault rifles and tricorner hats with tea bags dangling off of them in Panera parking lots in 2009. A month after Obama was inaugurated,
but
this is their entire faces just like throbbing, angry dick skin, yelling about the fucking usurper in chief. They weren't mad at all.
That's like the middle American John Wayne thing, because they all want to be that John Wayne archetype of, you know, I don't get involved in other people's problems. I'm just going through life. I'm kind of a just laconic guy. Nothing really bothers me. But they're actual, like, they were prepared to like call in artillery on their own positions at Chick-fil-A.
Well, I mean, we did a thing where we did an episode where we just went through some of the most trafficked conservative websites, news websites, and every top story was a pissed off Jerryman about some TV show or movie or Lena Dunham. And it was just a collection of grievances. That was all that they are. You go to any of these sites, it's just grievances.
Well, their thing is they're just mad that people are seeing Black Panther. Like, I'm not seeing it. You don't have to see a superhero movie. It's fine.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro definitely is the portrait of equanimity when he's like, Wakanda doesn't exist. Wakanda is not real.
But also what he's doing here is setting up a dichotomy between being happy and being angry. Like, you can be one or the other,
right,
and it's better to be happy. Whereas I think, like, a lot of people, I think if you try as hard as possible to never be angry, or don't find anything in your own life or the rest of the world to be angry about, I don't think that's a very happy life.
No, it's
great.
great.
I think the placidity, like being placid the exterior, probably speaks to a much deeper unease and lack of confidence.
No. Keeping everything very cheerful and happy and never expressing any anger. It's a recipe for good vibes and happy life that people as diverse as John Wayne Gacy and John List have followed to great results.
So Prager continues here. He says, last week in Atlanta, I spoke for about 40 minutes to 6 randomly chosen black students from a local black college for the upcoming film No Safe Spaces that Adam Carolla and I are making.
Oh, Jesus.
What a time to be alive.
Is that a thing is that Atlanta? Is that like jury duty? You get a summons, you have to go talk to fucking Dennis Prager? I can't imagine anyone doing that of their own volition.
I would rather watch a Serbian film than the No Safe Spaces movie with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager. He said, each one said he is oppressed. When I told them that I didn't think blacks in America are oppressed, I sensed that they had never actually been told that by anyone. Yeah, Dennis, you sensed that, but I guarantee you none of these 6 guys have literally never encountered the idea that black people, hey, stop complaining. You have it good
in America, that's a totally foreign concept.
It was akin to telling physics students that gravity doesn't exist.
Which I've also done.
And when I added that I don't think women are oppressed either, they were equally shocked. That would be actually funny if the 6 randomly selected guy were all hoteps and they were like, I agree with that. Women are demons.
If you could do Dennis Prager meets the black Israelites, that would be, he'd be like, look, we disagree on some things. I don't agree with them that Hitler was trying to save the true Jews who were black Americans. I don't agree with some of the things that Hitler did, but we're all having a barbecue together. We're being positive.
That's the kind of power that the man actually doesn't want happening.
Yeah.
So he says, ask yourself this question. Is a black child likely to grow up happy if he is told by his parents, his teachers, his political leaders, and all his media that society largely hates him? Of course not. Raising a black child to regard America as racist and oppressive all but guarantees an unhappy black adult. Let me offer a counter.
How to Nurture Your Black by Dennis Prager.
I mean, like, he seems to be saying here that, like, there's too much of a chip on the shoulder thing and that, like, it's too much of an excuse or whatever. But is his answer to this raise black people, or just like black parents don't teach your kids American history? Like, that seems to be what he'd be saying. And he goes,
you teach them Prager where it's like, actually Robert E. Lee was the least racist man in America, and that's why he was given his command.
So he goes, let me offer a counterexample. My father, an Orthodox Jew, wrote his college senior thesis on the subject of anti-Semitism in America. In it, he described quotas on Jews in college admissions, Jews prohibited from joining country clubs, Jews prohibited from law firms, etc. In other words, my father fully acknowledged the existence of anti-Semitism in the United States, yet he raised my brother and me in an American-loving home and told us he believed that American Jews are the luckiest Jews in history because they are American. I like that he uses that story alongside the African-American experience in this country, which is a little bit more than just not being allowed into country clubs.
One of the richest ethnic groups in America and one of the poorest.
And also
and the most incarcerated versus least.
And also like Prager, who anytime anyone says anything about Israel is like, you're doing the Holocaust. He's like one of those guys. It's like,
also, by the way, after hearing the beginning of this, where he's talking about how the conservatives don't get angry because they don't blame other people and they don't feel like they're oppressed. I looked through his town hall columns. This is the most recent
Prager?
town hall columns. He had one in September of last year titled "Conservatives in America Like Muranos in Medieval Spain."
Holy shit.
And the first paragraph is, for those unfamiliar with the term, Muranos were the name given to Jews in medieval Spain and Portugal who secretly maintained their Judaism while living as Catholics in public, especially during the 15th century in the Spanish Inquisition. So nobody feels oppressed, literally thinks conservative Americans who control all 3 branches of fucking government are like the secret Jews who had to worry about doing surprise pork tests, or else their fucking fingers would get tweezed off.
Like they just approach Dennis and they're just like, hey, watch this episode of Girls. It's really good, right? And then he has to be like, yes, it is.
And if they don't, and if he says, I thought it was a little, I thought
to the rack.
It was a little, it's like, sorry, Judas chair for you, buddy.
Dennis Prager is being held in Jezebel Tower.
So he goes here, I therefore never knew what it was like to walk around thinking most of the people I met hated me. Wow, you don't know what that's like, Dennis? Are you kidding me?
It's amazing.
That is a testament to how well he was raised, that he could be that oblivious to what his everyday experience surely must be like. That alone contributed to my happiness. So again, ignorance is a very important part of being happy.
Ignorance, and also being part of a Jewish community that by the time he was growing up was largely integrated into America, didn't suffer nearly the type of systemic oppression that other minority groups did, and had more money.
So you guys,
it's such a bad water fountain, and so little of it.
Leftism makes one other major contribution to leftists' unhappiness. It promotes ingratitude. In my book on happiness, called Happiness is a Serious Problem, and my talks on happiness, I emphasize the central importance of gratitude to happiness. Without it, one cannot be happy. There isn't one ungrateful, happy person on earth. Yet ingratitude toward America is central to the left's worldview, further reinforcing the unhappiness of its adherents.
I mean, it's too many negative. I can't follow the grammar even. It's like too. Would you read that sentence again?
Okay. There isn't one ungrateful happy person on earth. Yet ingratitude toward America is central to the left's worldview, further reinforcing the unhappiness of its adherents. He has used the phrase unhappiness and happiness about 10 times in 2 sentences.
Dennis never let his editors get him down with negativity.
See, I would kind of scotch some of those ins and uns because I end up thinking I have to be happy. I mean, it's really scary. That makes me very unhappy. And the word, it's important. It's unhappy, that paragraph.
This is how it ends. Unhappy Americans on unhappy Americans on the right blame the problems inherent to life, and they blame themselves. Unhappy Americans on the left blame America. That alone goes far in explaining the unbridgeable differences between left and right.
I'm just every problem you have is personal. The left will never be friends. This country is inexorably divided forever because these people live in a death cult. Blacks, cheer up. Okay, have a good one, everybody. I'm Dennis. This has been Dennis's Big Brain Corner. See you next week.
Just like his bio here says, Dennis's latest book, The 10 Commandments, still the best moral code.
Fuck you, Hammurabi, you piece of shit.
I'm a fan of the Golden Rule myself.
Whoever has the goal makes the rule.
Yeah,
dude.
boy. Should we leave it there for this week?
Yeah.
I'd like to thank my good friend and father, Daniel Menaker, for sitting in today and seeing what I've been up to this past 2 years.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Die Heimat ist weit, doch wir sind bereit. Wir kämpfen und siegen für dich. Freiheit. Dem Faschisten werden wir nicht weichen. Schicksal auf die Kugeln hageldicht. Mit uns stehen Kameraden ohne Gleichen. Und ein Rückwärts gibt es für uns nicht. Die Heimat ist weit, doch wir sind bereit. Wir kämpfen und fliegen für dich. Freiheit! Rührt die Trommel, stellt die Bajonette. Arbeitsmarsch, der Sieg ist unser Lohn. Mit der Freiheitsfahne prächtig Kette. Auf zum Kampf, das Seemann-Bataillon. Die Heimat ist weit, doch wir sind bereit. Wir kämpfen und sterben für dich. España corre, que